Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're going to continue to talk about everything going on with Shang-Chi, because it is really the biggest news story going on, not just in movie news, but also in box office news, as the spin continues, leaving out key pieces of data when it comes to whether or not the film is going to be profitable or not. And also a very interesting point that I don't think is being nearly given as much attention, if indeed it holds to be true, which still very much remains to be seen, and also could very much fall apart, seeing that there aren't a lot of big movies set to come out over the next week or two, with many films being pushed back and being delayed into next year, or at least several months back at this point in time, putting Shang-Chi in a pretty good position to continue to go in a very strong direction. But of course, that still remains to be seen. Before going any further, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. And once again, thank you to everyone who has recently subscribed to the channel, as the numbers have been going up, talking here about these box office numbers. And I try and do so in the most objective way that I possibly can. Obviously, I'm human, and so there's going to be, of course, subjective thoughts that sometimes creep in. But when it comes to the numbers are what they are. No matter who you are, no matter whether you like the movie or not, the numbers are as they are. So anyway, coming here from Deadline, it says, Shang-Chi to the moon, Marvel Asian-American superhero. Notice again, the way the media is trying to frame it. And it's interesting how anyone who is even being critical of the film, of which I'm not because I haven't actually seen the film yet, but anyone that's being critical of the film, or even if you're someone like me who's covering the movie and being honest with the numbers and what they mean and how we have not even gotten close to the point of talking about this film being an actual box office financial success, it's interesting how people throw out the phrases like ist and faux, but it doesn't make that much of a surprise when you recognize the fact that this film is only being painted by the racial identity of the people involved with the movie. And if you don't see an issue with why that type of reductionism of the human person is problematic, I can't really help you all that much with this. But anyway, as it says here, it is wrapping the Labor Day weekend with a record 94 plus million and the best Monday ever during the pandemic. Again, this is the typical talking point we've seen throughout the entire pandemic, is this is the best of the pandemic, the best of this, of that. But in reality, it doesn't really mean much of anything for the entirety of the box office itself, because if one film does really well, but all the other films underperform or don't do as well, then in the end, what does it really mean to say that you had the best of a pandemic time? You know, it's really one of those things where unless every single film is starting to trend in a positive direction, then what we are is just having a couple of movies here and there that have a couple of strong moments, and then the rest of the box office just slugs back to where it is. And as again, experts have been saying for a while, likely will not actually get back to where it used to be, at least 2019 levels, for another 2 years or so. So even though Shang-Chi is obviously overperforming in a lot of different ways in a lot of different markets, it is still something that is, I think, going to leave the box office cold, especially over the coming weeks when there are no other major releases set to come out for a decent while. But as it says here, this is the Tuesday AM update on Shang-Chi. And notice the language that's being used. With Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings on the marquee, audiences didn't take a holiday from the movies. As expected, the destined Daniel Cretton-directed Marvel Cinematic Universe title came in much higher than what Disney was spotting, earning $19.2 million yesterday. Oh, please, Deadline, do not act as if you knew better than Disney or that you were able to get it correct. Because remember, these are the same people who in their long-range estimates, don't forget this, in their long-range estimates, this was from the industry, said the film was only going to make $35 to $55 million domestic. This was what the 3-day weekend was supposed to be. It ended up being $20 million higher than this for the 3-day weekend, making $75 million for the 3-day weekend, now over $90 million for the 4-day holiday weekend. So it's amazing to me that you have people like this at Deadline and other places that are going to try and act like, we're going to just ignore that one, but let's just go ahead with it. And anyone who says, well, aren't you doing the same thing? You're just doing the same exact thing. It's, well, no, because again, my videos are still live. All of my numbers are still there. And even in the videos themselves, I talk about how there are these different contingencies, these different things that can happen when it comes to box office. That's one of the hardest things to predict. That's why I typically don't make actual numeric predictions for opening weekends, because it is so unpredictable to know who is actually going to show up to a movie. And this is really something that a lot of these industry experts, so-called industry experts, don't understand, is that I would argue the vast majority of people, when they go to see a movie, go to the theater to buy their ticket. Meaning that they don't actually buy their ticket until they get to the actual box office. And I know this only because I worked at a theater for a few years, and the amount of people that will wait in line to buy a ticket there at the theater and not simply pre-order it is staggering. And that is the number that is really hard to be able to quantify, because you can follow pre-orders and pre-sales and things like that. You can't follow, or you can't predict with any sense of certainty, the number of people. It's amazing that they're able to get sometimes pretty close in certain ways, but it also leads to the discrepancies like what we saw here with, again, $20 million higher than expected. It also raises the question of, were there any possible radio promotions going on at the time? Because again, this is something that studios will do. Studios will give out tickets in a certain way, or at the very least allow for these different programs to buy out mass bulk tickets and therefore be able to inflate their opening weekends. Now, I'm not saying that that's what is happening here, right? I have not found any actual evidence of that, but it has happened before. And that does sometimes happen, especially with bigger studios with opening weekends, because obviously they want their opening weekend to look as impressive as it possibly can. That's why the second weekend drop-off is a lot more significant, because typically the studio kind of leaves it behind, leaves it in the dust, and it just allows the film, hopefully, to be able to make its money back over the long run. But we'll have to wait and see exactly what this film does. But if what they are predicting here, and again, they've been wrong before, and so I could totally see this film not having as steep of a drop, or having steeper of a drop, depending on, again, what the numbers actually tell us when the day comes out. They are expecting that this film will have a 60% drop next weekend, which, again, could still be enough for the film to reach the point of profitability, but also could be just enough for the film, especially the law of diminishing returns, to just miss out worldwide, especially since it is definitely doing incredibly well here in the United States, but it is not performing nearly as strongly in the international marketplaces. Not to say that it's doing poorly in the international marketplaces, but when you look at the raw numbers of $90 million and then the rest of it coming from international, it's at $140 million worldwide, you realize, oh, okay, so it's made more money domestically than it has anywhere else. And so, again, that is still something worth noting as such. But as you can see, it says here, all this adds up to a revised 4-day total of $94.67 million. Shang-Chi also owns the number one spot. It could also own, or should at least own, the number one spot in its second weekend, estimated to be a 60% drop, with around $30 million ahead of the Warner Brothers HBO Max James Wan horror film *Malignant*, which is expected to be in the single digits. Obviously, that is going to be impacted by the fact that it's day-and-date release with HBO Max. But again, as a horror film coming out in September, who knows, maybe it'd do a little bit better there. But $30 million, obviously, then that's still a strong second weekend numbers-wise, especially for pandemic times. But that 60% drop is going to be something worth noting. Is the film going to get to that 60% drop? Is it going to perform better or worse? That is what is going to determine whether or not this film makes any actual net gain or net profit. That's something that some people don't quite understand. And it's in a good position, by the way, to do very well, because as I said, there's not a lot of stuff really that it has to compete with. And this coming weekend, you have The Card Counter from Focus Features. Okay, they don't even have a long-range estimate on that film because it's going to be a much more independent, not in as many theaters. You have the *Malignant* film coming out on HBO Max same day in release. You have a film called *Queen Pins*, which is not expected to do very much either. The week after that, what do you have? *Blue Bayou*, *Cop Shop*, *Cry Macho*, *The Eyes of Tammy Faye*. Again, no real major film names there. The next major release you really have technically would be Universal Studios' Dear Evan Hansen, which might get the musical theater crowd excited, maybe the teenage audience excited, but that really isn't going to be a whole lot as far as most likely what the audience, typically the audience that would be going to see Shang-Chi would go to see. So as you can see, it has very little competition up until really things like The Addams Family 2, which again, they've made a sequel to this, so obviously the first one did well enough for them to want to be able to have that. You have the Hotel Transylvania film coming out, then you have No Time to Die, which is really the next major big budget film set to come out on the 8th of October. So this film really is going to stand by itself, and so it is in the best position possible to make profit. And so if this movie then, again, we can't know this really until that second weekend drop-off, if this movie does not make its money back, if this film does not actually reach profit, having so little competition, I think that is going to be the long-term story and is going to be the most important story element of all of this. And anything that they have to say about, yeah, well, you're still going to have the Labor Day record, I've already pointed out how that is just not impressive. Because when you adjust for inflation, the film that held the record spot for that weekend all around was the 5th week of The Sixth Sense back in 1996. So this is not a weekend that has had major releases ever come out. And so basically any studio that wanted to have a record set, if that was their main goal, was to set a record and not necessarily to make money, yeah, they could have released on Labor Day. But what they recognize is that they can open it up on different weekends during different times of the year and actually make more money. So again, I think that's important to talk about. It is important also to reference that this film did overperform based off of what the estimates were. This is indeed true. This is indeed factual. However, what is also factual is that even with this release, right, coming in around $150 million or so, you're still dealing with a film that is in the negative. Right, this film costs $225 million when you added marketing cost, and you have to take into account they only get 60% of this number here, so that's why it's at negative $137 million. So depending on what the week 2 drop-off is going to be, which again, right now, the so-called experts are saying it's going to be a 60% drop. And here's the thing. I might actually be on the side of someone who wants to see this film financially succeed. I don't really care one way or the other as far as whether this film financially succeeds or not. I'm just going to point out whether it is going to succeed financially or not, based on numbers and based on data. Yeah, I've got my issues with giant companies like Disney, who wouldn't have giant issues with giant companies like Disney, who work incredibly well and work incredibly closely with communist regimes, right? It is something that I think is worth calling out from time to time. However, these numbers are what they are. It is also worth noting that this film had the 27th biggest Monday of all time. Now, to be fair, it did do better as far as the Monday is concerned of Avengers, so 18.89 million. Now, they did not adjust this for inflation, so I think that that's going to be something where you kind of have to keep that into account. And that's also the biggest story of the day as well, is that whenever you even bring up concepts like inflation, like net gains, like marketing cost, for some reason you're automatically labeled as an ist or a phobe for just bringing up facts, for bringing up data. It's kind of amazing to me how much protection this film is getting, not just from media types, but also from MCU shills, MCU like not just fans, but MCU zombie fans. People that just are going to consume, and can't have for a second an objective thought in their head about what these numbers actually are and what these numbers actually mean. Because here's the thing, this film still could be financially successful. It still has a bit to make up. So once we know that second weekend number, we'll have a good indication. But domestically, it's expected to drop by 60%. Now, that's not obviously going to be nearly as high as what we saw with a film like Black Widow, but it is still going to be probably on par with Black Widow, only because Black Widow did perform better in its opening weekend, 3-day opening weekend. And that is something that I think is absolutely worth noting there, that if you see a somewhat equivalent drop or even just a little bit of a better drop week 1 to week 2, but it's not performing as well in other markets, or if it's not able to hold even in the midst of not having a lot of competition, or if maybe it loses audiences because of the actions of its star, that could all have an impact. There are so many factors at play here that could totally make the film doing better or worse make complete sense. What's interesting, too, and something that a lot of people have been bringing up in the comment section, is that whenever you hear people use the pandemic as an excuse to try and say, well, it's the pandemic, you look at college football stadiums at capacity. You look at events like wrestling with All Out this past weekend at capacity. There are people that are willing to go out. There are people that are not only willing to go out, but willing to go out and be literally right next to each other, mask or no mask. So to keep using the pandemic as an excuse for why people are not going to a theater or not going in as many numbers to a theater doesn't really hold up all that much. But when you also have the main actor of the studio and all the verified Twitter, blue verified check marks on Twitter going after different channels and mocking them for talking about the box office here and talking about their own subjective views of the film, right? Because this is not just talking about box office numbers, it's also talking about people who just didn't like the movie. Again, that was their own subjective thoughts, their own opinions on the film, which, again, there's been positive, negative, mixed reviews on this movie. And whenever people talk about the box office predictions, guess what? Even though the film did overperform even what the industry experts themselves put out there, we also know this still is the third lowest domestic opening in MCU history. That is a financial fact. We also know that this film did not do as well as Black Widow did in its opening weekend. That is, again, also a financial fact. Whether or not this film makes money or not still remains to be seen. So it's interesting to me that that is what is going on here with the main actor, who, by the way, does not really seem like the most charismatic of guys, based purely on what I've seen in his performance from the trailer of the film. But it is also, I think, indicative of the fact that when you are, as an actor and as a star of a movie, are going to go after channels or go after people or go after general fans, hey, I think that in the end, you're going to have a negative impact on your results. But of course, there's a lot of factors at play here, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But as is reported here by our friend John F. Trent over at Bounding the Comics, Shang-Chi actor Simu Liu mocks critics for reporting on disastrous box office predictions. The joke's on him. Again, third lowest weekend, especially when you adjust for inflation, which is an incredibly important factor. Again, that is something incredibly important to talk about and to remember. Those predictions from Box Office Pro did not come true. Instead, Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings earned $75.5 million in its domestic opening, again, doing much better than the industry experts. So if you're going to mock anyone, it should be the industry experts and not YouTube comments who are just pointing out financial facts. If you factor in inflation, it's the third worst MCU film ever, financially speaking, on the domestic marketplace. Captain America First Avenger earned $65 million back in 2011, but in 2021 dollars, it's around $78.9 million. Thor, $79.7 million. It says also here, on top of the Shang-Chi performed worse than even Black Widow that was available to view on Disney Plus the same day it released. So even though Black Widow, which many people said was indeed being, kind of the money was being taken away from Disney Plus numbers there, even then Black Widow still had a better opening weekend, and Disney claims also earned $60 million from that movie. So you're talking about a film that almost did half of what Black Widow did. So again, we can stay focused on, Labor Day and, the industry experts were wrong. I agree. I totally agree that you had that issue going on. However, these are things that are incredibly important. And as far as the people saying, you just hate it because of the Asian American star of the movie. Oh, you must not have seen my retro review series where I go through the vast majority of the Zatoichi films, because I must be an ist or a phobe and I must just, for some reason, hate Asian success. Yeah, that must be it. I love also in this article, he does a great job because he points out here saying, so I guess people don't love films like Enter the Dragon. I guess people don't like some of the other Asian actors that have been a part of the MCU for a very long time. Ming-Na Wen, Melinda May in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., among many others. Again, truly amazing to me, the amount of hubris in this capacity. But anyway, what are your thoughts? Do you think this film is going to have a 60% drop from week 1 to week 2 domestically? Do you think that it's going to overperform their estimates once again? Again, they were wrong. The experts were wrong the first time, so it could very well happen again. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If that's this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my September Locals Patreon and Subscribe Star members. First with my Locals members, Cats App, D Sharp, It's a Modern Major General Story, Laura Bifford Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. I want to give a shout out to, especially to Laura, who is now a double supporter on Locals and on Patreon. So thank you for that. And to all of my Locals members. A shout out also to my Patreon members, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, Laura the Modern Major General Story once again, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B., the Empress of the Universe. And a shout out also to my Subscribe Star members, the are Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B., Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you all very much for supporting the channel. It really does mean a lot. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single video or live stream on the main channel, please check out the links in the description below, specifically that top link, which will bring you to all of the links to my various social media pages and also places of support as well. And remember that if you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also get access to giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I have a live giveaway of Snatch on 4K Steelbook. I've also got ones for Dread, Wrath of Man Blu-ray. I've also got A Quiet Place Part 2 on 4K. I've got Top Gun on 4K, Sicario on 4K, tons of films and more to come, especially as more films are getting released for those giveaways. At the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. Not only do you get to listen to the podcast, you also get to ask questions that we answer as much as we can and as fully as we can in a much more, I guess you could say, uncensored way, but again, a much more free-flowing way for our members over there at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. And if you join the Chosen of Valhalla level, you get access to all of those things, plus in your first month, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, and I send it to you no matter where you are in the world. And also, you get to once a month be featured on the channel in the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we talk about movie, news, and pretty much anything that you want to talk about. So if that all sounds like fun to you, check out those links below. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.